And we are live. Let's this thing up. There we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this live version podcast, All Dolphins podcast on this Tuesday, March 11th, 2025. Hope everyone's doing well. Miami Dolphins hitting us with more news. After the fact later in the day on Tuesday, the same as they did on Monday, the latest news for Tuesday involving the team coming to terms with two more free agents, safety Ashton Davis, formerly of the New York Jets, wide receiver Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, formerly of the Tennessee Titans, a move that I absolutely love. This came after we got word that the NFL had awarded the compensatory picks for the 2025 NFL draft, and the Dolphins got not one, not two, not three, got 4 compensatory picks. It's the maximum that any team can get. Dolphins were one of 3 teams that got the 4, along with the Baltimore Ravens and the Dallas Cowboys. We knew they were getting 3. The one wrinkle, and we're going to try to get clarification on this maybe tomorrow, involves Cedric Wilson Jr. and I'm going to go through this again as quickly as I can. The compensatory formula involves net gain or loss of compensatory free agents, which are guys who reach a certain level in terms of the annual average salary they get with their new contract, and then you get bonus points for playing time or postseason accolades. Dolphins were always going to get 3 because they lost more than they got. And then the idea was they're going to get a 3 for Robert Hunt, a 4 for Christian Wilkins. They wound up getting the highest 4th for Christian Wilkins. And the only reason it didn't move up to a 3 was because Wilkins' place in the ranking of all the compensatory free agents who would get a compensatory pick was based purely on the annual average salary of $28 million he got from signing for the Raiders. Couldn't tack on points for postseason accolades or playing time because he was done after 5 games because of the foot injury he sustained. So it was a 3 for Robert Hunt, it was a 4 for Christian Wilkins, and there was a 7 for, I want to say, Deshaun Elliott, and then there was an additional 7 ostensibly for wide receiver Cedric Wilson Jr., and this is where it becomes tricky because the thought was that Cedric Wilson became a UFA based on the void of his contract, and those players not necessarily were not supposed to be eligible to provide compensatory pick for their loss. So don't know exactly how that played on. Then there were 3 more free agents the Dolphins got who were compensatory free agents, but they were offset by the 3 the Dolphins signed. And of course, I should have my list right in front of me. And if my eyes wander from time to time, I'm looking at my other screen on my monitor to be able to look up the information while I'm talking. So I'll try to do this as seamlessly as possible. And I'm going to move down to the Dolphins here. So the Dolphins lost 7 compensatory free agents last offseason. The 4 I've already mentioned, along with Raekwon Davis, Brandon Jones, and of course, Andrew Van Ginkel. Some of those were offset by the signings of Aaron Brewer, Jordan Brooks, and Kendall Fuller. So the exact spots, the Dolphins got the 2nd compensatory pick in the 3rd round behind only the Minnesota Vikings, who got a 3rd for Kirk Cousins. So the Vikings got picked 97 overall. Dolphins got picked 98 overall. And then the Dolphins wound up getting the 1st compensatory pick of round 4, along with 2 picks in round 7, including the very next to last pick. So the Dolphins, if you like those things, were very, very close to getting Mr. Irrelevant. Instead, it's the Kansas City Chiefs who got that distinction with the 257th overall pick. For those wondering, it's the first time, in fact, because I was asked this on social media, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. It's been a while since the Dolphins had a comp pick. Yep, it was 2020 the last time. And that year, they had a 4 and a 7. They got a 3 in 2007 for the loss of Olivier Vernon, if you recall. The Dolphins actually had tagged him, rescinded the tag. He wound up signing with the New York Giants for big bucks, had a very productive first season with the Giants, got the Dolphins a 3rd round compensatory pick. How I may skip the part of who the Dolphins wound up using the pick on because it was cornerback Cordray Tankersley from Clemson, who didn't really necessarily pan out with the Dolphins. So the Dolphins scorecard right now on the free agency front, unless something breaks while I'm doing this live podcast, which could happen because it happened, Friday when I was doing an episode with Perk. We were taping an episode, and during the episode, the Dolphins extended the qualifying offer to restricted free agent Kader Kohou the right of first refusal, which means he's going to stay with the team. So as it stands right now, again, as I'm doing this podcast, I have the Dolphins with 6 free agent signings so far. Ashton Davis, Nick Westbrook-Akine, safety Ofeatu Melinfowu coming over from the Detroit Lions, and then the 3 from Monday, backup swing tackle Larry Borum from the Chicago Bears, guard James Daniels from the Pittsburgh Steelers, and quarterback Zack Wilson, of course, from the Denver Broncos. If I were to rank those to me right now, the one I like the most, again, also we're dealing a 2-year contract for $6.5 million based on the published reports, is Nick Westbrook-Akine. I absolutely love that signing. You are talking about a guy who brings size to the wide receiver core, which, yes, is significant. You cannot have a wide receiver core that's got nothing but short guys. It doesn't work, particularly down the end at the end of the season, where the game is actually a little bit different than it is in September. It's a lot more physical. You need the big bodies. And the Dolphins right now, top 3 wide receivers, if we're not counting before Westbrook-Akine was added, were Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and Malik Washington, all of whom are on the small side. Jalen Waddle is not necessarily as short as the other guys, but he's not big at all. He's not a physical receiver, so durability for him and fighting physical coverage is going to be an issue with him. Also, like the James Daniels signing, yes, there's a risk involved because he's coming off the Achilles injury, but the structure of the contract is the Dolphins easily can walk away from it after 1 year with minimal pain in terms of cap commitments. And the upside with the dude is very, very high. So really, really like that pick. Larry Borum, again, is going to make the roster, but he is going to be a backup tackle. If he's got to be in the starting lineup, it would have to be in an emergency. Otherwise, this is not an ideal situation. Ashton Davis is a guy who's played mostly special teams in his career, but has shown an impressive knack for coming up with the big plays. And Dolphins saw that firsthand in the 2024 season finale at MetLife Stadium, when Ashton Davis had not 1 but 2 picks in the Jets' 30-20 victory against the Dolphins, which gave the Dolphins a losing record for the first time since the 2019 season. And that leaves our good friend Melinfowu from the Lions, a guy who had injury issues last year, highly regarded cornerback prospect coming out of Syracuse as a 3rd-round pick a few years back, was moved to safety, very, very high upside, had injury issues last year. The salary he signed for, I don't recall off the top of my head. I want to say it's in the neighborhood of 3.5 or something to that neighborhood. It's not egregious. Again, to me, that's a good move. And said this before on the podcast, the idea the Dolphins were going to swing big and give out large contracts to anybody was never all that realistic. That just flat out was not going to happen. Dolphins have re-signed 3 of their unrestricted free agents. We're going to include Quentin Bell in that group because he was a restricted free agent who the Dolphins did not tender. Therefore, he was going to be on the open market at 4 p.m. on Wednesday, with the Dolphins getting no compensation, no right to match, but the Dolphins re-signed him anyway. So why didn't they just tender him in the first place? Well, because they signed him today for $1.5 million, according to published reports, as opposed to $3.2, which was the lowest restricted free agent tender offer you can make, which is what the Dolphins did with Kader Kohou, which gives them the right to match any offer made to the player. Generally speaking, offer sheets to restricted free agents are not that common. It happens, but it's not like you're going to see them all over the place. Very, very high expectation that nobody's going to sign Kader Kohou to an offer sheet, and either the Dolphins are going to work out a long-term agreement if they decide that they want to sign him to a long-term deal, or they'll just have him play on the restricted free agent tender of $3.2 million. Also re-signed Elijah Campbell, another safety. Good depth piece, good special teams player. Not surprised he came back with Dolphins, as I mentioned in the podcast episode on Tuesday morning. Fourth straight year he signs a one-year contract with the Dolphins. And then that previously, Matt Dickerson, the defensive tackle, came over from the Kansas City Chiefs last year after being released by the Chiefs, signed to the Dolphin practice squad. They moved him to the active roster, played 4 games. It's a depth move. He may or may not make the 53-man roster. Dolphins now have lost 3 unrestricted free agents who have agreed to terms with another team. Everything will become official Wednesday at 4 p.m. Braxton Berrios to the Houston Texans. Classy Instagram post by him, by the way, which I chronicled in a Dolphin notebook on Tuesday on Miami Dolphins on SI.com that I encourage everyone to please check out. All the content is free. Robert Jones signed with the Dallas Cowboys or agreed to terms on Monday night. And, of course, Tuesday morning, it was Javon Holland who agreed to terms with the New York Giants, getting a 3-year deal worth $15.1 million annually with the possibility of going as far up as 15.6. And as I mentioned in the podcast on Tuesday morning, kind of telling to me that he wound up not being the highest paid safety on the free agent market, that being Trayvon Moehrig, formerly of the Las Vegas Raiders, who got $17 million annually from the Carolina Panthers. Let's see what else we got here in terms of news before we just attack the comments and questions. I know Zack Wilson is somebody who is going to elicit a lot of different opinions. And I said this for those who didn't see it or weren't paying attention. It's a little bit of a weird move because, again, this is a guy who flamed out with the New York Jets after being the second overall pick in 2021, sandwiched between Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars and Trey Lance of the San Francisco 49ers, who got that pick in the big move from the Dolphins. Then got traded to the Denver Broncos last year for basically a cup of coffee in the newspaper. And then, lo and behold, Sean Payton got his hands on him and actually started making something out of him. Looked very good by all accounts in training camp, in the preseason. The passer rating was like 115.9 in the preseason. I can't emphasize that enough. In the preseason. But then he wound up being a number 3 all year behind rookie Bo Nix and Jarrett Stidham. The Broncos hung on to him the entire season. Maybe to see if they could squeeze a compensatory pick out of him. Maybe they could swing a trade at the deadline last year to get a draft pick for him. But they re-signed Jarrett Stidham, so obviously they valued him more as the backup to Bo Nix than Zack Wilson. Very, very high ceiling, also an awfully low floor. And the question is that really what the Dolphins need or should have wanted for a backup to Tua Tagovailoa, who obviously had these injury issues last year? Personally, I'm not so sure I wouldn't have preferred going with a more proven veteran, even if the idea of somebody all of a sudden completely blossoming has some merit. But I don't know that, again. I know a lot of Dolphin fans are not big fans of Marcus Mariota. I think if something happens to Tua in week 2, week 3, like it did in 2024, probably feel a little bit more comfortable going to the next game with Marcus Mariota, where I know what I'm going to get from him, pretty more or less. Whereas with Zack Wilson, we don't know. Dude hasn't played in a regular season game since 2023 against the Dolphins when he was running for his life basically the entire first half before he left the game with a concussion and then was done. So, okay, how about we attack some comments, and we'll go here maximum an hour and maybe not quite as long depending on what we have going on in the comments. And I see here no particular order. I see this is an interesting question. Do you think Jaire Alexander is an option? Concerned about the price tag. This is one position where the Dolphins have not done anything yet that they really need to, is signing a cornerback. I know Asante Samuel Jr. is still out there. He's a good player. I've seen Tre'Davious White's name mentioned, and I'm sorry, I don't get it. He was once a really, really good cornerback for the Buffalo Bills, but he's gotten a little bit older, and then the injuries have taken their toll, and he's just not the same dude. That doesn't make a ton of sense for me, just like Joey Bosa doesn't make a ton of sense for me. Nothing has happened yet. I think it's pretty fair to still think he's going to wind up with the 49ers, particularly after they released Leonard Floyd, who was one of their outside pass rushers, on Tuesday. For those who care to track what's going on around the league, Floyd wound up signing with the Atlanta Falcons after playing with University of Georgia. But I don't like this idea of Joey Bosa. He makes no sense. The Dolphins already have that profile of an edge defender, dealing with a lot of injuries the past couple of years, high ceiling. That's Jalen Phillips at Bradley Chubb. And on top of that, you also have Chop Robinson coming off a very good second half of his rookie season. You just re-signed Quentin Bell for a depth and competition. You have Mohamed Kamara, who was a fifth-round pick last year. You re-signed Cameron Good, who's probably going to make the team as a special teams guy. So I just do not understand even the logic, other than the fact that, sure, his father played for the Dolphins. And by the way, I want to correct myself, and thank you for somebody pointing that out. John Bosa, before being drafted by the Dolphins in the first round in '87, did not play at Ohio State. Played at Boston College. His kids played at Ohio State, both Nick and Joe, and Joey. Just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Is it me, or does Zack Wilson on South Beach sound like a mistake? I don't know Zack Wilson's personal life, other than I think there was something about his best friend's mom or something, or I don't even want to go there. I don't know. I honestly don't know. So I don't even want to touch that. Let's see what we got here. I'm going to go back to the top. That's fair is fair. Barton, we made some decent moves today. No, they did make some decent moves. Today specific, I like Meli Fonwu. I think there's a very high ceiling there, and the price wasn't egregious. And I absolutely, like I said, love the Westbrook-Ikhine signing. If we remember what happened last year with the Dolphins in their quest for a third wide receiver, it was a complete flop. And this was after there was so much hoopla with the signing of Odell Beckham Jr. in May. Turns out, as per Chris Greer in his public comments, they knew he had a little issue. He might not be ready for the start of the regular season. He wasn't. Finally made his way into the lineup and absolutely has zero impact. Asked for, got his release. No other team picked him up, which tells you. And then the Dolphins really had no great answer in terms of a third wide receiver, although you could make the argument, sure, Jonnu Smith became a big factor in the passing game as the tight end, and then Devon Achane also became a major factor catching passes out of the backfield. Still, it would have been nice to have a good third wide receiver option, and I think Westbrook-Ikhine. I remember Westbrook-Ikhine from the Monday night game against Tennessee in 2023 when he caught a 2-point conversion late in the game to bring Tennessee to 27-21. They got the stop on defense, scored a touchdown, beat the Dolphins. And then last year he had 9 touchdowns, like on 32 catches. It's pretty impressive. And again, he can be good around the goal line because you're looking at a wide receiver with some size. Jose Carrasco, I think I am more queasy now than yesterday. Why? Why so? Feel free to reply. Why so? I don't know if I'd agree with that. Shuggy Woogie. Hi, Shuggy Woogie. Thank you very much for the donation. Much appreciated. What positions now will we address in the draft? Well, the 2 positions that have not been addressed that are screaming needs are defensive tackle and big contracts being dished out there. Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave. Who else got a big deal? There's some other ones that escape me right now. And cornerback. And this is a good spot for a cornerback in the draft. Barron from Texas would be a nice option. Perhaps Will Johnson from Michigan could be a nice option. A defensive tackle could be Kenneth Grant from Michigan. Would be somebody who would be very intriguing. I think it's maybe a little bit early for Walter Nolan, I should say, pardon me. Those are the spots that certainly scream. You could make the argument, pardon me, for another offensive lineman. But I think right now, I'd be more looking at either of those two spots, maybe a linebacker. I know there's some talk about Jihad Campbell from Alabama. Dave Wallace mentioning a possibility of a trade down. Sure, absolutely. What do we got? Oh, God, seriously. By the way, I steer clear of anything that has nothing to do with football. Can go ahead and I can massively do without quote unquote woke comments. Can massively do without them. Let's see here what we got. Jay Myers, AJ, a lot of injury question marks. We're going to have major contributors coming off big time injuries. Big time injuries. James Daniel, absolutely. Millie Wanfu had an ankle in the finger. That's big time. No. Who else? Ashton Davis, no, he played in the season finale, not coming off a major injury. Zack Wilson made no major injury. Larry Borum, no major injury. And then who am I missing? Who am I missing? Come on. Let me look it up here because I'm missing somebody. Why am I missing the six? Here we go. Okay, and and Westbrook Akine is not coming off an injury. So you're talking about one guy coming off a major injury. And as I mentioned earlier, if you are going to eliminate from contention for consideration everybody who's had an injury, you're going to wind up with nobody on your roster. That's just flat out, pure and simple. So again, the Dolphins structured the contract with James Daniel in such a way that if it doesn't pan out and he doesn't come back from the injury properly, and don't think they haven't gotten any information on him, to have some level of confidence that he's going to be able to come back and be the James Daniel he was before the injury. But even if it doesn't pan out, Dolphins can walk away from that contract after 1 year without major cap pain down the road. So no, I'm not worried about that. Gary Williams, hey Gary, if Saunders falls to 13, do the Dolphins draft him? I'm assuming you mean Shedeur Sanders, quarterback from Colorado. I really doubt it. I really, really, really doubt it. To me, he's a good, not great prospect. The Dolphins have needs. They have two under a big contract for the next 2 years. Ideally, you're not using another quarterback in that time span. So you're going to have Shedeur Sanders sit 2 years. I could understand it for value purposes, but if he slips to 13, then we're talking about obviously some concerns that maybe limit his market in terms of trade value. So no, I do not believe the Dolphins would draft Shedeur Sanders even if he fell to 13. AJ, how are you, buddy? Thank you very much for the contribution, partner. For all you do, this Bud's for you. Thank you. Thank you for the pause and in-depth articles during this dry preseason. The only thing I'm going to ask you, AJ, and I appreciate you, is no at the end of poop. But not a big deal. Again, very much appreciated. And I appreciate as much as you appreciate the content. I appreciate you checking out the content and the podcasts, because if you guys are not checking it out, there's no point in me doing it. So I appreciate everyone who's on here right now. Wish there are a few more people, such as life in the big city, but I appreciate, and it's their loss. I appreciate all you guys here, and I appreciate everybody who checks out Miami Dolphins on SI.com. Again, the content is all free, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of it. Orlando, how are you, Orlando? Running back position is thin. Do you see the Dolphins addressing it in the draft or free agency? Running backs are a dime a dozen, if we're going to be really honest about it. So I don't think there's a major urgency. My thing is, and this maybe shouldn't be a consideration, but the Dolphins have two running backs under contract for 2025, and it's your third-round pick from 2 years ago and a third-round pick from 2025, essentially considering you traded that pick to get the fourth last year to select Jalen Wright. Are we going to go back and take another running back in the draft? Or do we see how the running back market plays out. There's a ton of guys who are out there who are not going to be cost prohibitive. I think it's more likely it's going to wind up being in free agency. Shoot, I wouldn't be shocked if Jeff Wilson Jr. wound up coming back. I think he's going to test the market. If he winds up seeing doesn't have any great offers either financially or in terms of potential playing time, he may say I might just as well come back to Miami. And then hopefully maybe the Dolphins give him more looks because they really kind of kept him on ice perhaps too much in 2024. Particularly if they're going to keep him instead of keeping Chris Brooks, which I'm going to maintain for quite a while until somebody proves me otherwise that was just flat out not a good move. YouTube user, that's a cool name, YouTube user. I kid. Hard to determine this early, but how does this class so far compare to last year's class? You just said it right there. I don't know that if you look at, again, last year, the marquee names in terms of what they did, well, the bigger names were guys who had been released, like Jonnu Smith, for example, or somebody who signed very late. That was Calais Campbell. Odell Beckham Jr. is a guy who had been released who was like much later in the process. Your big ticket guys who weren't that big of a ticket, but the biggest for the Dolphins were Aaron Brewer, who had like 3 for 21, and then Jordan Brooks, 3 for 26. In the case of Brooks, that really worked out well because he was very good last year. Brewer was solid. I don't know that I'm totally crazy about his profile in terms of a center, particularly if the concern is always short yardage, the interior of the offensive line, physicality, when you bring in somebody who might be the most athletic center in the NFL, but he's also undersized. So this one of those where you kind of weigh those two. But it is very, very, very early in the process. I do like whatchamacallit. The Westbrook Ikine. I like, even though I'm not totally crazy about the Zack Wilson move, it's better to me than sticking with Skylar Thompson and Mike White was last year. And I'm going to say it again. I've said it before. I cannot for the life of me understand why they kept Skylar Thompson over Mike White, even though he did look better in the summer. But in terms of the game action and what the career resume was, that didn't make a lot of sense to me. But again, they did not ask for my opinion. Jeff, you tell him, Jeff. Hit the like and subscribe. Thanks, Jeff. 14.9. I've made the pledge. When I reach 15,000, which has taken longer than I would have liked, but such is life. I'm not going to say in the big city again because it's corny, but such is life. I will wear some type of Dolphin gear as has been requested of me. How's that? AJ Barrow, decent, but it may be a bit prophetic. AJ, and I'm not quite sure what we're referring to here. The Bears GM is using this offseason as a please don't fire me yet. Greer is status quo. Dave, here's the thing. I'm going to tell you why this is not fair, because the Bears have had salary cap up the wazoo. Dolphins did not. Okay, Dolphins had to create salary cap space to get under the limit to be able to make the moves that they made, and that was with the restructures of Teron Armstead and Bradley Chubb. So it's kind of apples and oranges, where the Bears had all this money to play with, where they could do a lot of moves, and I mean they've been at it. I mean they've done some work. The Patriots also had the most cap space of any team in the NFL, and they made a lot of moves. It's a lot easier to make moves. When the Dolphins had all that cap space in 2020, they were signing players all over the place. Now, they also were signing overly generous contracts. Shaq Lawson certainly comes to mind. Kyle Van Noy, and then there was a market correction from the Dolphins where they wound up cutting him after 1 year. And then he goes on and does some really, really good work for Baltimore and with a good year with the Chargers as well. So again, this offseason, Bears GM, Dolphins GM, they're not operating under the same parameters, so it's not fair to compare. That's funny. Thank God we found our backup Milford back. That's funny. Props to you, Brian. That was funny. Shake Money, did we do anything else? Yeah, I ran through it. Right now, Dolphins have 6 unrestricted free agents with whom they have agreed to terms. Nothing is official until Wednesday at 4 p.m. when the league year kicks off. So it's not impossible, highly improbable, but it does happen that one of those deals could just go poof if either the Dolphins have a change of heart or the player decides, you know what, yeah, no, not signing with the Dolphins. But it's like I said, it's very, very rare. It's just not official. The ones that are official are if it's a player who had been released by another team. For example, Devontae Adams with the Rams. He was released by the Jets, therefore he was not subject to not being able to sign until Wednesday at 4 p.m. Or if you're re-signing your own player, you're not subject to that time. So the Dolphins could announce the Quentin Bell move. Let's see what we got here. Although I don't know that they did. I don't believe they did, actually. Cliff D, Zack Wilson stinks. Well, that's the big question now, isn't it? The other part about, another point I want to make about Zack Wilson. He's the guy. Dolphins signed him to one year deal, $6 million cap hit. They're not cutting him, and they're not paying $6 million up to $10 million with incentives on playing time and playoff wins. They're not paying that for a number 3. So the idea that they could bring in somebody else and then Zack Wilson will just sit and we'll try to develop him, not happening. That's just not how it works. Now the Dolphins we're going to bring in somebody else. Could they? And I'll give you a name. It wouldn't necessarily shock me if they re-signed, I should say, Tyler Huntley, who's going to become a free agent Wednesday at 4, who I don't think is going to get much of a market. Remember last year he signed with the Browns as one of 4 quarterbacks on their roster, along with Deshaun Watson, Jameis Winston, and DTR. And he wound up being the odd man out and wound up going to the Baltimore Ravens practice squad, and that's where the Dolphins got him. So I don't know that anybody's going to sign Tyler Huntley. Possible he may decide I'm going to come back to Miami. And with his thinking, maybe Dolphins, maybe he'll keep 3. I'll be on the roster the whole year, or you know what, maybe I'll beat out Zack Wilson in training camp and the preseason. And again, that would be a massive whiff. If Zack Wilson's not the number 2 quarterback for the amount of money the Dolphins are spending on him, that would be a massive whiff. Dave. If you were hurt most of your career, come to Miami, we will pay you top dollar. Who are they paying top dollar to? Dave, seriously? They have not. The biggest contract they gave out so far is James Daniel, 3 for $24. And again, if anybody missed it, the Dolphins have an out after 1 year where they'll eat $4 million of cap space next year if they decide to move on from him, if it doesn't pan out. So that's not top dollar. And the upside is good enough to where that's a good gamble to me. So I don't know. I get the frustration. That's not a fair comment. It's just flat out not a fair comment. How did it? Nick, thank you very much for the contribution, Nick. Appreciate it. It's been a solid free agency for the Finns. Not crazy about Zack Wilson as a backup QB, though. Thanks for all your hard work. Thank you very much, Nick. Yeah, I'm with you, man. I wasn't crazy because, again, if you try to project what's the likelihood, chances are, like last year was a bad year. I think if my math is incorrect, like Tua missed the most games he's ever missed in his career. After a year where he played all 17 games. So what's a fair? Obviously, the cloud of injury is always going to be over the quarterback situation. That's just the way it is. But let's say he misses 3 or 4 games. Again, personally, I would rather have the certainty of a guy where it's lower floor, lower ceiling rather than higher floor, lower ceiling than lower floor, higher ceiling. I'd rather know what I have. Andrew's on back. Hey, Andrew. Thanks very much for the contribution, bud. Becton proved that 6'7" OT could play guard effectively for the Eagles. If Armstead comes back, could Finns move Patrick Paul inside to guard? Yeah, you're giving me the one outlier, and Falele from the Baltimore Ravens is another guy who's 6'8", plays guard. It's just very rare. It just doesn't happen that often. You have to have the mobility. There's a question of leverage. Patrick Paul himself said at the Dolphin Cancer Challenge that, no, he's a tackle. I don't see it, to be very honest with you. Would I eliminate the possibility? Sure, it could happen. I just really, really don't see it. Really don't see it. Hey, Dave, thank you very much for the contribution. Much appreciated. Any info on re-signing Dotson? No, I'm going to guess. I'm going to guess that could be a little bit later on. It's interesting on Dotson. Dotson was a backup for the Bills until his last season, I want to say. Then he signs with Seattle as a free agent. They dump him like halfway through the season. He comes to the Dolphins, and for the most part, he was solid. I do think the Dolphins wouldn't mind re-signing him. Again, it always comes down to financial considerations, which was a deal with Javon Holland. There was a certain point where the Dolphins were going to be like, Javon, you know what, love you, buddy, but can't go that high, and it's going to be the same with Tyrell Dodson. I don't know exactly what he's asking for, but we'll see how that one plays out. Agent Navy, Zach is not Marino choice as a backup. I would think he would like Zack Wilson, actually, because he's a gunslinger, and I think Marino respects that. I don't know. Shake money, the Miami Dolphins and Seattle Seahawks are tied with Jets QBs at 2 apiece. No, actually, I think Dolphins have the lead 3-2 because you're forgetting, and how could you forget? Shame on you, because I know you're thinking about Mike White, and you're thinking now about Zack Wilson, and with the Seahawks, it was Geno Smith and Sam Darnold. How can we forget about Tim Boyle? Come on now. Tim Boyle played for the Jets before he played for the Dolphins. So Dolphins have the lead. Here we go. Big Johnson agreed. Got to have physical presence, not just speed. And I think that was a big problem last season. Got news for you. That was a big problem 2022, 2023, 2024. The makeup of the team on offense is problematic. It limits your margin for error. I said this before. I said it in 2022 when they were flying away. They need forever. The way the offense is constructed, it's on timing and speed and rhythm and all that. That can be disrupted. That doesn't carry over necessarily if the conditions are bad, if the style of play is getting very physical and the flags aren't throwing refs. Whereas if you have a punishing style like the Eagles, like the Baltimore Ravens, generally speaking, the weather conditions don't matter. So the margin for error expands. This is why I'll go back to there was an Amazon conference call with their media analyst last year with Andrew Whitworth, Brian Fitzpatrick, Tony Gonzalez, and Richard Sherman. And I asked this question to get their feedback on kind of what I've been saying all along, which was basically how far can you go with that type of an offense, or is there a limit? And basically they kind of agreed with the premise, and it was always they have to have home field advantage in the playoffs so that they don't have to be exposed to the elements. But even at that, even if they do play at home in the playoffs, the style of play is just flat. It's just different. And that's just not the NFL. You look at every sport. Like, I'm a big hockey guy. Stanley Cup playoff hockey is completely different than regular season hockey. And it's in basketball, it's the same. It's a lot more physical in the playoffs. And in the NFL, you get down to December and January in those games, the physicality ramps up. So we shall see. Here we go here. Shuggy Wuggy. Any news on Calais or Tehran? What's our cap at? Not quite sure on the cap. I believe they are operating with a little bit of a surplus right now, but not a ton, based on the moves that they created, the signings that they made. Once those get registered, they also, remember, they can restructure more contracts. They can gain an easy $19 million of cap space by restructuring Tua, which is going to push some cap commitments further down the road. And I've kind of come around on that. I don't like the idea of necessarily tying the organization to Tua longer than necessary. On the other hand, the Denver Broncos paid Russell Wilson $53 million last year in cap space while he was playing for the Steelers, and it didn't stop them from making the playoffs. So Calais or Tehran, Calais Campbell didn't sign until June last year, which basically leads me to believe. And then Tehran Armstead accepted the pay cut, basically, as he has said, to lower his cap space heading into the league year. to make it easier for the Dolphins to continue carrying him while he decides. So I don't know that either decision is imminent. I would think we'll know more about Teron Armstead quicker than we'll know about Calais Campbell, but I don't know that we're going to get an answer on either one of them maybe before the end of the month at the very earliest. And again, with Campbell, used this as a target last year. It was June before he signed. So shake money. I would rather Joe Flacco. Yeah. Although I'm not crazy about the fact that he's 62 years old. Sorry. What is he, 41 now? And can't move, but you kind of know what you're going to get. And there's not that unpredictability that you're going to have with Zack Wilson. Just flat out. I'd rather Mariota. Yeah. I think I would have liked that too. And I'm not saying Marcus Mariota is a great quarterback. He's not. But I have a pretty good idea what he is. And I think, let's say, look at the 2024 season, for example. If Marcus Mariota had been the backup quarterback, do we really think the Dolphins would have been 2-4 in the games that Tua missed when some of those games were against Tennessee, for example? And Tennessee was a really frustrating game because if you saw that game, it was like the Titans were doing nothing on offense, basically, other than telling Mason Rudolph, do not lose the game, don't throw picks. Because this was the way the Dolphins could win. In fact, if you remember, they got a pick early in the game from Emmanuel Ogbah, dropping into coverage, and Will Levis gets hurt, and then Mason Rudolph gets in the game, and it's extraordinarily conservative game plan from Tennessee from that point on because they knew they didn't have to do anything. That the Dolphin offense just wasn't capable of doing much damage beyond that. Seattle game would have been tricky either way. The Indianapolis game, Anthony Richardson's passing stats that day were frighteningly bad. He did some things with his scrambling ability, but again, this was a game the Dolphins easily would have won with any sort of decent play. Although now I'm gonna contradict myself here because actually now I remember and I went back at that game. Tyler Huntley was okay. You had two nasty fumbles from Ingold and Raheem Mostert. You had a fourth down stuff. You had a rare Jason Sanders missed field goal. And then Huntley leaves the game because of the injury. Now it's Tim Boyle in the game. So, again, who knows? Bottom line is, yes, I think I would prefer Marcus Mariota, even though I don't know that he's a great quarterback. Kevin, I believe there's a better chance of Calais Campbell coming back than Teestead. Well, the big difference, though, between the two, Kevin, is that Campbell is an unrestricted free agent. So he doesn't have to return to the Dolphins. And don't think that there won't be interest in him once he makes it known that, hey, yeah, I want to play again. Because he played, he was good last year. It's crazy. And for all of those who listen to the podcast and accuse me of having a man crush on whatever quarterback it might be, I have a man crush on Calais Campbell. Number one, he's class personified. And number two, to ball out the way he balled out last year at 38 years old, damn. That dude was good. And no, it's got nothing to do that he went to University of Miami, which is a team I covered once upon a time, was a Blue Moon I have a soft spot for. The dude's just massively impressive. And so I do think he's going to get some offers around the league. I would think the Baltimore Ravens would come calling very quickly, among other teams. So, but I don't know where he stands. Again, he's going to be 39 when the 2025 season kicks off. Does he want to put his body through that whole regimen? And if you know the story with him, he spends a lot of money and he does an awful lot of things to get his body ready to play. It's quite the commitment. So, and if he's got kids, so it could be that he may be like, you know what, I'm done, and nobody could blame him. Armstead, it's kind of a two-way decision with Armstead, though, because he's doing interviews all over the place because I think he's got a future in broadcasting. But in every interview he does, he sounds like a guy who really wants to keep playing. He just loves playing and wants to keep doing it. But the Dolphins have a decision to make at some point. I know, who was it who asked me? Was it Andrew who asked me about the idea of moving Patrick Paul inside to have Teron Armstead at left tackle? Yeah, again, I have a hard time with that one. And no, I don't see any way in hell Teron Armstead would return, put his body through all of that to be a backup when he's been a starter his entire life, going back probably to Pee Wee football. So I don't see that. I think, yeah, he wants to win and all that, but he wants to play too, and he still plays at a high level. When he's in the game, he's really, really good. You tell him, Toby. Come on, you tell him, Toby. 338 people and only 109 likes. Come on, man. It's rough. Brian, might be why we haven't signed a DT, waiting on the draft and Campbell. If you're waiting on Campbell and counting on him to be back in 2025 for your team, I think it's a wrong way to go. If he does come back, it's a bonus. It's additional depth. Dolphins should not plan like it. Just like they said, they're planning on Teron Armstead retiring. You can't. They should not make their plans thinking Calais Campbell is going to play for them unless he's given them some sort of commitment. And outside of signing a contract, I don't know what kind of commitment you could do. So the draft might be one place to get additional depth, but they need a lot of defensive tackles right now. They only have under contract: Matt Dickerson, Zach Sealer, and there may be other ones. Mike, I didn't see your question. I'm going all over the place. I didn't see as I'm sure you can understand, the folks who make a donation to the podcast get preference. Outside of that, I just go back and forth. So it's nothing personal. I didn't see it. So if I see it, I absolutely will. And I'm going to keep going back and forth. I'll come across it at one point. I'm not ignoring you, Mike. You know I love you, buddy. So don't take it personally. I'm going to answer. I'm going to answer any Expos question. Do you think the Expos will ever come back to MLB? I just don't know that they have any kind of investor who's got the appetite to throw in that kind of money. Laird Fentress, hey Laird, what do you really feel is the win-loss minimum will be coming this coming season for Teflon Chris to keep his job? I can never answer that question because it depends on the circumstances. They could go 7-10 if it's because of a rash of key injuries, and that might make a difference in what happens after the 2025 season. So if it goes south without injuries being a key factor, then we could be looking at a change. But I don't know that it's a lock. Because Chris Greer has a lot of equity when it comes to his post with the Dolphins. That's just the truth. This is a good question here. Dave, do you think McDaniel can change the culture in the locker room? I know winning makes things better, but if we start losing again, how will he fix it, or can he? No, it's a very good question, and that's going to be the referendum on Mike McDaniel as a head coach. His persona has always been that he's a player's coach. Guys like playing for him, guys like him, and all that. But there has to be a balance, and that's not necessarily McDaniel's personality to be a hard ass. Even though I know, trust me, he's a lot harsher behind closed doors than he is in front of the cameras and in front of the media. But still, the issues that surfaced and that were well documented last season, it's not necessarily a recipe for winning football. Oh, no, thank you very much. Call me Alan, please, though. But skip my question again. Okay, I'm going to go back to the top. I got to find your question, Mike. It's killing me here that you think I dissed you. Was it on the bottom? Did you see that as of this morning, the Dolphins are the oldest team in the NFL? All Dolphins podcasts could change still due to free agency, but not a good omen. Yeah, but who does that include, though? Does that include Jordan Poyer, who's not going to be on the team? Does that include Calais Campbell, who might not be on the team? Does that include Teron Armstead, who might not be on the team? So I don't know. I'm not sure I'd be all that torqued up about that kind of stat in March. Let's revisit that in September. Zack Wilson played under Shanahan's system in New York. His OC was Mike LaFleur. Yep. When Tua got injured, we will have a quarterback that will have no problem with knowledge of the system. Thank you for all you do. Okay. And had knowledge of the system with the Jets and didn't work out too well, did it? That knowledge of the system thing. Okay. Obviously, it helps. It's not the end all be all. All I'll say about that. What do we got here? Dave, thank you again, partner. Mike, I'm looking for your question, buddy. This team is cooked, right? The next rebuild is going to be the time. Define cooked. They can make the playoffs in 2025. Again, they're not that far removed from being 11-4, heading into Baltimore with a chance to play for the number 1 seed. What do we got? But I apologize for this. I'm looking for my buddy Mike's question here. Who is our new wide receiver coach? Robert Prince came over from the Dallas Cowboys, interviewed for the New Orleans Saints offensive coordinator because he had a connection with Kellen Moore, but he wound up hiring Doug Nussmeier instead. So Robert Prince stayed with the Dolphins. You skipped 2 super chats. Okay, I'll go back, Jim Meyer. Sorry, guys. Sorry. It's not, trust me, there we go, Mike. Sorry, Mike. My bad. Hey, Poop. Why are Finns being conservative in the must-win year for Graham McDaniel, or is it not a must-win year? They don't have the cap space. They just do not have the cap space to make splash shot moves. I don't know what kind of moves we were looking for. We were looking to sign Jonathan Allen at $20 million a year. That was never going to happen. They just do not have the cap space to do it. And partly is because of what they did last year when they were so reckless in handing out extensions. And I kind of railed against it last year. And I want to play the guy of looking back and say, I told you so, but it's like, why in the hell were the Dolphins handing out extensions all over the place when they hadn't won a playoff game? I did not get it. It kind of hamstrung a little bit what they could do. And if you recall last year too, it was more volume than it was big signings. The biggest contract they gave out last year in terms of annual average was Jordan Brooks, who was a hair under $9 million a year. And right now, so far, it's James Daniel, who's at $8 million a year. This is obviously the max value of the contract. So this is not it's a must year, is a must win year. It's a must win year in terms of it can't go totally south. I don't know if I necessarily buy this idea of, let's say they're 9-8, they missed the playoffs by 1 game, they're automatically gone. I'm not sure that's totally fair. Now I know Dolphin fans are not going to want to hear this, but I don't know that it's an automatic. I just don't. I don't know that Steve Ross has much of an appetite for making wholesale changes unless he sees it's a dead end and they're not going anywhere. So, and again, Mike, my apologies. I had not seen it. I'm not dissing anybody here. Jay Myers, again, my apologies as well to you. I was referring to Phillips, Chubb, Austin Jackson, and Daniels coming off injuries, Tua and Tyreek to a lesser extent. I get what you're saying, but what is it you want to do with Phillips, Chubb, Austin Jackson, and Daniels is the only one that you acquired. The other guys you already had. I mean, you're not going to cut Jalen Phillips, are we? I don't like the fact that right now he's playing for $13 million because that's the number of the 5th-year option, and it's going to stay that way. Or if they want to lower the cap number, then they have to sign him to an extension to bring that down. But then you're committing money down the road. I don't know how crazy I am because you're dealing with a guy who's coming out, and I love Jalen Phillips, but torn Achilles 2 years ago, torn ACL last year. That's kind of Chubb. The Dolphins dealt with it, and with this contract, Austin Jackson's coming off. Definitely coming off an injury. It was more like a knee cleanup that he had to basically almost as much preventive as there was remedial at the time. And Tua and Tyreek, well, they're stuck with Tua and Tyreek. There's nothing they could do based on the contract that they gave those two guys last summer. So, again, my whole thing was you can't eliminate everybody from consideration because they've had injuries, even though you already have too many of those guys on your roster. But look around the NFL, though. I mean, it's not like the Dolphins are the only team that has that kind of situation going on. It's a physical sport. And you're going to have injuries, and you're going to have to rely on guys who are coming off injuries. It's just a matter of it's the way it is. Andrew, thanks again. Need a nasty OL to win in cold weather and playoff games. Our zone scheme OL more athletic and not as tough nasty as OL that don't run downfield as much. Yeah, correct. Absolutely. Doesn't mean you can't have a physical offensive line if you're doing a zone scheme, but typically the number one thing you look for in a zone scheme offensive lineman is mobility, the ability to get to the second level and move in space, more so than just flat out power blocking. So, yeah, that's part of the issue with the Dolphins, without question. No, Mike, it's not okay. I just didn't see it. It's my bad. My apologies. It's never okay. Do you believe we rework Tua's contract, or are we sticking to bargain shopping? It's going to be, regardless, it's going to be bargain shopping. Because, again, I think right now they have, if we count, they were at 49 players under contract. If we talk on the 6 that they signed, they're like at 55 or maybe, and then the guys they re-signed. So let's say that they're at 58. I think they're going to carry 90 on the offseason roster. Now, mind you, it's a top 51 that count against the cap, but they need to sign a lot of guys, and they can't. I'd be very, very surprised if they signed a big ticket free agent. And would not be surprised one bit if James Daniels wound up being the highest paid free agent they had. Well, hockey question. I like this. Thoughts on Marchand to Florida? Absolutely, absolutely love it. Brad Marchand is the type of guy you need in the playoffs. He's gritty, nasty, borderline dirty, physical. It's the type of guy that wins. He's like same type of player as Sam Bennett, like Matthew Tkachuk, which is why when the Panthers made the trade for him, it was like, to me, it was like, boom, that's the piece. Because the Panthers, and I'm going to get back to the Dolphins very quickly here. The Panthers were a great team, great regular season team before they made the trade because they were highly, highly skilled. They didn't have the toughness and the grit to win in the playoffs as they were constituted. Matthew Tkachuk changed all that. Let me address this here because it's out there. You ever think about having Big O on for a podcast? He can be much, but make some decent points. Big O's knowledge has never been an issue. No, I do not plan on having him on the podcast. He has his own podcast. Let him do his thing. Eric Bedenbaum, hoping Mason Graham falls to 13. Okay. That would work. I'm not sure. I don't like Kenneth Grant more. I think there's more upside there, even though Mason Graham is a better college player and maybe the more sure thing in the NFL. But did we miss out on Bosa? I don't. Again, I've been on this live podcast for about an hour now. I'm going to wrap it up pretty soon. So I haven't not seen, but the latest scuttlebutt was that the release of Leonard Floyd by the 49ers was paving the way for Joey to join his brother Nick with the 49ers. Apparently, they're very, very tight. They both grew up in Fort Lauderdale, both played at Ohio State. It's very logical. I don't know that Joey Bosa is a better player right now than Leonard Floyd, but we shall see. Yes, signing with San Francisco. Okay, so there we go. Logical. And more power to him. I hope he has a great time over there. To me, the idea of the Dolphins signing him made zero sense. So imagine the team we could have if Greer did the right thing and didn't re-sign Tua. Had he played on the 5th-year option last year? It's a great what if. I don't know that teams will be clamoring to sign Tua to a huge deal right now, if that were the case. And last season that played out the way it did. I also don't know, if we're going to be fair about it, exactly how long the quote-unquote hold-in by Tua would have lasted and how things would have materialized. Yes, he will. Marshawn will kiss you on the lips. Yeah. He will. Okay, we're going to start wrapping it up here. I'm going to look at other quick questions here. Genty at 13, do you take him? I don't. Could the Dolphins? Maybe. Got an awful lot of carries, and it's not a position of need on a team that's still got a lot of needs. So, I'm not sure I get that there. Hill sells the shirts top 5. He stays if he wants to stay. Don't know what that means. Sorry. Hill's not going anywhere. Not going anywhere. John C. Whoa, John C. Thank you very, very much. If you get time, go over the last year and review Miami's 2nd and 6 yards or less. I would love to know how many times they passed, were called for holding, or sacked. I would like to see them run and gain 0 yards and have a manageable 3rd down. Okay. I am going to actually, John, thank you so much for the very, very generous contribution. I'm going to write this down, 2nd and 6. And literally, look. You know what I can do? I know where to look right now. I can do something very quickly here. Guys, bear with me here for 1 second. I think I can get you something here. 2nd and 6 in 2024. And no, I'm not going to tell you where I'm getting this information. That's top secret. Let me see. Here we go. Okay. I'll be right there, gang. Okay. Distance. Here we go. 2nd down. 2nd down and 6. I have 7 rushes for 16 yards. I have 15 passes for 145 yards, an average of 9.67 yards. I have 1 scramble for 6 yards. This is for on 2nd and 6. I can't tell you anything, John, in terms of sacks. I think that would go under passes. It doesn't tell me exactly how many times they would have gotten sacked. So I hope that answered your question to a certain degree. So I did my best. I try. That's what I can do. I try. Okay, and then let's see what else we got. Who is your late round sleeper pick you love? Mine is Scatabo. Not going out on a major limb there, my man. Yeah, I love Scatabo too. Tackle breaker, but late round sleeper, you're not getting past the 4th round. So I don't know if we're looking at as a late round pick. So do you see us bringing this is going to be the last one. I'm going to wrap it up, and I've gone over an hour. I wanted, brother, whoever I said C-Core, I wanted Dre Greenlaw. Damn it, I wanted Dre Greenlaw too. I wanted I'm going to butcher his name because I can never. Tofanga, is that his name? From the safety from the 49ers. Love that dude. And yes, I understand there was injury concerns with both him and Greenlaw. Again, it's the reality of the NFL. If you sign him to a reasonable contract, and I don't recall what they got. I don't think Tofanga got a huge, and I apologize if I'm butchering his name. I don't believe he got a huge contract. But those dudes are baller, and they both went to the Denver Broncos. Dylan, last one. You get the honor of the last question. Do you see us bringing back any other guys from last season? Oh, but I do. And in fact, if you guys, and it's going to be another reminder, please check out the website. It's partly where I make my money. And as much as I enjoy doing it, little financial rewards doesn't hurt either. Here we go. I'm going to go back to the story I wrote with a final forecast on Dolphin UFAs. to refresh my memories. But yes, I do absolutely expect several of the Dolphins pending UFAs to re-sign. I think Deshaun Hand's a very strong possibility. Saran Neal's a very strong possibility. I was wrong on Robert Jones. I thought he would come back. I had Elijah Campbell coming back. I still think they're going to re-sign Isaiah Wynn. I had him on my list. I did have Tyrell Dodson. I think at some point, maybe Tyrell Dodson right now is checking out what he can get on the open market. I think it's somebody the Dolphins would like to have back. Do we really think River Craycraft's not going to come back? He's always coming back. Not a lock. And on the flip side, and I think Tyler Huntley is also another possibility. I think he's going to check the markets, find out he doesn't have a whole lot, and I think he could be looking at this Dolphin situation and thinking, hey, I'll go back, be the number 3, maybe beat out Zack Wilson for the number 2 spot. I mentioned Jeff Wilson Jr. Again, another thing, if he can't find either any decent money on the open market, and he's coming off a season where he was an afterthought and barely saw the field. So it's not like, I don't think teams are going to be banging down his door. He re-signed with the Dolphins as an unrestricted free agent 2 years ago. I could see that happening again. Who else? I think those are the guys I would see, but I would be shocked because every year you're looking at, and I did the research, it's between 7 and 9 UFAs who re-signed with the Dolphins. So far, we're at 3, or actually 2 3 if we count Quentin Bell, who was an RFA non-tendered, becoming a new UFA. So that's 3. So if you do the math, so probably 5 or 6 more will re-sign with the Dolphins. The big one obviously would be Calais Campbell. The Dolphins can get that done. Deshaun Hand would be very nice. He's a good piece in the middle of the line, and I see I have another contribution, so I cannot ignore this. If there's a question coming, I cannot ignore it. And it's John C. again. John, dude, you are much too generous. Much appreciated. Take your time with that. 6 or less, there's something there. 6 or less, okay. Now you're putting me to work and give me some homework here. Okay. I'm going to plan on doing another one of these live podcasts during the free agency period, maybe next week. Kind of enjoy doing those. I appreciate all of you for joining me for this past hour. Please like, subscribe. Get me over 15,000. So you want to see me wearing Dolphin gear. Could be a hat, could be a jersey, could be both. I don't know. In the meantime, also, please check out the website, MiamiDolphinsOnSI.com, where we got you covered every day, all day. That's going to wrap it up. Thanks, everyone, for joining me, and enjoy the rest of your evening.